old Japanese, old Indian culture in which basically you were born into your life. Your life was set by your family. What your father did, what your grandfather did, what your great-grandfather did completely 100% influenced who you were going to be. And even now, I mean, I think that's still, I mean, I lived in India for a year, and I went to a few weddings, and the weddings of people who had a little bit of money lasted for 3 days. And you're lined up with every member of the family, getting your picture taken with each member of the family, as if they're cementing you into their kind of fold. So you go from having your own destiny set basically by your family, who you're going to marry, what you're going to do, and until you die, that's the way it is. There's not this question of like looking for yourself, trying to figure out what it is that you want, what's really important to you. That probably doesn't occur to people who are born into those circumstances. And so I think what he's talking about here when he's saying, well, maybe you came to the monastery, you did this really difficult thing to sever your ties to this group of people, but probably within yourself, your whole identity is tied up with that group of people. So just throwing that away is not such an easy thing. But for me, actually, I never have had that worry. Even though my siblings are probably not going to have kids, and I'm probably the one that everybody thought was most likely to be having kids and continuing the Knight family name. And even though my dad started a successful business that still exists, and I could have, from a long time ago, worked in that business and taken it over myself, for some reason, for some combination of my personality, the culture I grew up in, and also my family being, probably my parents coming from the hippie generation, there's this ideal that, even though it wasn't the case for them at all, your kid should have infinite opportunities. The door should be completely open for whatever life they want to choose. And so I really got that message, and I really took that to heart. And immediately there was this big problem of like, well, what do I choose? Like, what do I care about? Who am I? What do I want? So this kind of who am I question really caused me the most suffering. And even though I encountered these 3 noble truths, right, or not noble truths, but 3 Dharma seals. This is Samboin, means 3 seals of the Dharma. The first is impermanence. The second is no self. So right away they say, well, actually this whole idea of self is an illusion. But that's, but I couldn't accept it. Still you read in Buddhist literature this kind of idea that, well, there's a true self out there. There's something that only you can do. So they sneak around it in trying to sneak in a self in a lot of places. And I sort of hold on to this idea that there must be a real me out there. But so far I haven't found it. And actually because I don't kind of have this idea, it's caused me a lot of trouble, a lot of problems, because I tend to kind of, whoever I'm with, I sort of, especially if they're a particularly strong person, but no matter who it is, really, I sort of mirror them. I sort of take on the way they talk, the patterns of their movements. I'm always sort of looking for myself in each person, I guess, and that can actually cause a lot of problems in human relationships, because actually people don't really want to talk with themselves. I think actually after a little while, like it gets kind of disgusting to just see yourself in the mirror, and eventually the question comes up, well, who are you? What do you want? And I have no answer to that, and that's actually been what ended a lot of relationships was that I didn't have an answer to that, and the other person didn't believe it. I had a secret girlfriend at Antaiji for a couple years ago, and she was German, not very interested in Japanese culture, also didn't speak Japanese, and that created a lot of, she's a very strong-willed person, created a lot of tension within this group. So I was always, in that time that we were together, I always felt really torn between being the Steffi Mui and being Antaiji Mui, whatever that was, or depending on who it was. And I remember one time sitting in the Soto Shokudo with her, and in break, and we were having a conversation, kind of in our own little romance world. And Docho-san was sitting at his normal spot at the head of the table, and it was winter time. It was we were coming up on this time of year, and we had built this snow protection. We had just finished that morning building the snow protection, which is these metal sheets we nail up and put against the windows over there. And Dojo-san was sitting right behind it, so he looked at it, and I was in the middle of a conversation with Steffi, and he goes, Tsukan, this thing, there's a problem with the snow protection. I want to tell you about it or whatever. And I didn't, at the time I didn't register it, but later Steffi said, wow, it was so great how when Docho-san said, hey, I want to tell you something, you didn't just get up right away and run over there and say oh, what is it? Instead, you didn't become his slave, you didn't become his kind of servant in that moment. And I don't remember what I did exactly, but probably I was kind of whatever, the pull of her weighed out over the pull of Docho-san in that moment, maybe just because I was closer to her physically. And, but when she said that, what I thought was, well, yeah, okay, I didn't become Docho-san's slave, but I was your slave. It's not that one is different from the other. It's not that, but from her perspective, yeah, of course, there must be something that I really want, and what I really wanted in that moment was her, or that conversation, not what was going on over there. But really, I think it was just geography or something. It was just like this, to me, they were equal. So that's a hard thing maybe to understand. But for that reason, it's really difficult for me to be in groups of people where I feel the pull, or during Samu, where if I'm working with one person, it's easy for me to just go along with their program. But if another person gets involved, then it becomes this clash of ideas, which is really a clash of identity. So anyway, that's what I'll say about that point.